The following feature presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
Now listen to me, Caesar. There can be only one talking chimpanzee on Earth. The child of the two talking apes.
20 years back. From the year, Senor Mando, when the two talking apes arrived on Earth.
And we believe that the male and female talking apes have come to us out of the future.
A month before the talking apes arrived on Earth.
From now on, you have but one assignment. To find that talking ape.
He's a performing ape for my circus.
A talking ape? That idiot!
This chimpanzee...
Get out a retraction immediately. Announce that the talking ape has been apprehended and put to death.
Hello to all you chimps, gorillas, orangutans, Underdwellers, Kigors, shark gods, and even you damn dirty humanoids. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Kovac. Wait, who's this Kovac? More on that later. I am Richard Wolosky, and I want to welcome you once again to Talking Apes. This is your Planet of the Apes podcast, where over the past 6 years, we have focused on the classic Apes era. We have broken down each episode of the live-action and animated Planet of the Apes TV series, and now, until there is a new Planet of the Apes TV series, we'll be talking with authors, actors, and the fan community. Now, everyone, please say hello to my co-host, Mr. Marco Gushewitz. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Rich. Can you believe that we're in 2020 already? And not only that, can you believe we're going into our 6th year of Talking Apes?
Yeah, no kidding. Seems like only yesterday I said, hey, Mark, do you want to do a podcast about the Planet of the Apes TV series?
Time flies.
It does. But hey, check this out. If you and I were in the Planet of the Apes universe, we would be only 650 years away from the events in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, which is the closest time we are here in 2020 to this Apes timeline, which was set in the year 2670. And of course, I mean everything moving forwards, because I know the closest we are to an Apes timeline would be Conquest of the Planet of the Apes that took place in 1991. So this is just moving forward. Wrap your head around those facts, would you? And then, get ready for this. We are only 1,065 years away from the events in the TV series, which was set in the year 3085. Is your mind blown yet?
It's getting there.
All right, well, hang on tight, because we are only 1,958 years from the events in the original Planet of the Apes film, and that was set in the year 3,978. Are you ready for more, Mark?
I'm always ready for more.
All right, now, for the legions of the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes, and we know you are out there, we are only 3,001 years away from that film, that timeline, and that took place in the year 5021. And we're not really sure about the new films because, as it says in the titles, it is set in the near future. So they don't give a date on those, so I get nothing for that.
You really did your homework for this episode, huh?
I did, because it's important to know how soon we're all going to become servants of the apes. And I want to be prepared.
From this day forward, my people will crouch and conspire and plot and plan for the inevitable day of man's downfall. And that day is upon you now!
You think you'll still be around?
Yeah.
You'll be...
Why? Do you know something that I don't?
650 years, you're going to have to freeze yourself and be reanimated.
I heard Caesar's speech in Conquest for the Planet of the Apes. I know what he's revving up to.
Right. Well, you'll be prepared. You'll be the only one, unless you go out and warn everyone.
Well, all the ape listeners, they're now prepared as well. That's why I have this rundown, so we'll all be ready.
Okay.
There you go. That's our service to all the ape fans out there. We're trying to protect you.
So, I gotta tell you, I'm real excited about today's episode because we are starting our journey back to where it all began, to the roots of Talking Apes when it was called Talking Apes TV. Remember that?
Oh, so long ago. Only 6 years ago.
So, that's true. So when it was called Talking Apes TV, we were talking about Planet of the Apes TV, more specifically, the live-action TV series. And now, over the next few episodes, we're going to go back and look at some of the unproduced scripts that were written for that show, including the one we have today, an original unproduced pilot from the late, great Rod Serling.
Yeah, we got a lot of requests to review these stories, and we talked about them very briefly when we wrapped up our reviews of the TV series a few years ago. When we wrapped up the live-action TV series, we went over these stories in like 5 minutes. But now we're going to go more in-depth with each of the 8 scripts and synopsises. Synopsises. Is it synopsises or synopsises?
I think it's synopsises.
Okay. Unfortunately, there's only 4 scripts available online. Of the 8 stories, there's only 4 completed scripts, and the other 4 we just have in the synopsises. So we're going to go over all of that. And as you said before, in this episode of Talking Apes, we're going to go over the very first script titled, you ready for this one?
Let's hear it.
Episode 1, The Phantom Ape.
Are you sure about that?
No, I'm sorry. I was mixing franchises. But this one is just called Episode 1.
You know, with a writer like Rod Serling, you figure he would have come up with a more interesting title than Episode 1.
Yeah, you would think so, but maybe he just didn't have time. He had that other series to work on. What, Twilight Zone? Pfft, what would that ever do for him?
Right, but I think the Twilight Zone was done by then, wasn't it?
You know what? That's one show I've never gotten into, Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits. I never got into those shows, so I don't know where in the timeline this fits.
All right, so let's kind of move right along before you get everybody against you, because I think you're the only person on the planet who could say those words. Now, Rich, before we get into the Rod Serling unproduced script for the Planet of the Apes live-action TV series, why don't we talk about what's been all over social media regarding the new Planet of the Apes movie that's being developed over at Disney?
You mean that's being rebooted or continued or
whatever,
remarketed, repackaged?
Depending on who you read, it could be anything.
Yeah, let's get into this.
So anyway, I remember, I don't know, it was about a month ago, I was reading an article, and there's a lot of articles that were basically saying that they were going to reboot Planet of the Apes. They weren't saying they were continuing the franchise that was created with Rise, Dawn, and War of the Planet of the Apes. They were saying reboot. MovieWeb.com, their exact words on their headline were, Disney's Planet of the Apes movie is a full-blown reboot. And then Cineblen said the next Planet of the Apes movie will reportedly be another reboot. Mm-hmm. But as you know, recently director Wes Ball, who's going to be directing the new Planet of the Apes movie, confirmed that it will be a continuation. On Twitter, after comicbook.com tweeted, the new Planet of the Apes movie will reportedly serve as a reboot of the franchise. Well, I guess this didn't sit too well with Wes Ball, and he replied back, I guess this makes it official. He wrote, it's never been easier for film journalists to actually get in touch with the actual people who actually know. But maybe it's the point to not fact check these days. Regardless, don't worry, I won't ruin the surprises, but it's safe to say Caesar's legacy will continue.
All right, now, break that one down.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. If you pay attention to the way he worded that tweet, he doesn't really give us any information about what they're going to be doing with the newer films. But what he is doing here that I really like is he's assuring us that it's not going to be what MovieWeb says, which is a full-blown reboot. He's confirming with us, and he's letting us know, don't worry, we're not forgetting those 3 movies that you grew to love. It's still going to be a part of whatever we do.
Yeah, if they rebooted it, it'd be like Batman and Spider-Man, and audiences would just get really, really, really tired of the whole thing. And Apes has already been redone twice, so I think people get it.
And to be honest with you, let's say they did decide to revisit the 1968 film. I would hope they would do that as a remake and not as a total reboot. And as long as it stayed within the timeline of the last three films, I would be okay with that. So I'm hoping that there's no reboot of any kind. If we get new characters, then they're just sequels to the newer movies. If we get a remake of the 1968 film, it's just a sequel to the last three films. And that's kind of what I want. I'm not sure exactly what I want specifically for them to make. I want them to surprise me, but I do want them to continue with where they were going with those last three films, because they were really, really strong films. And when something's not broke, you don't fix it. Isn't that what the saying is?
It is. And you know what? Right now, I am on IMDb, and I'm looking up Andy Serkis, and he's got a lot of films listed that has been announced, and there's no Planet of the Apes. I don't think you're going to do a Planet of the Apes film without Andy Serkis.
Well, there's two ways to think about the fact that Andy Serkis's involvement hasn't been announced. One, if they're no longer moving forward with Caesar because he died in the last one, but they're still going to move forward with the stories in that timeline, well, you might not use Andy Serkis because...
Of course you would, because his company was the one that was responsible for all the motion capture.
Right, well,
and he could play 80 other apes. He just became such a huge part of Planet of the Apes. And I think for the casual moviegoer, if they see an Apes film, they're not going... And if they see Andy Serkis in the titles, they're not going to think, oh, you know what? I'm so out of here because I can't see past Caesar, so this is not for me.
I think that Andy Serkis is basically the Roddy McDowall of the new Planet of the Apes series, because when you think about it, Roddy McDowall, after he was done with Cornelius, he went on to play Caesar, and then when he was done with Caesar, he went on to the live-action TV series. So that's what they need to do with Andy Serkis. Have him be a constant throughout all the films, but yet have him maybe play different characters the way that Roddy McDowall did.
Right.
If they don't use Andy Serkis, I'm still going to give the movie a chance, because Wes Ball said something else that was really interesting on Twitter that makes me feel good about him as the filmmaker involved in this whole entire project. And he said, I'll say this about Apes. I grew up on the original and absolutely loved the previous trilogy. I would only do this if I felt I could offer something special while still honoring what came before. We have something that's shaping up to be an awesome chapter to this franchise. So he sounds like somebody who really loves the franchise and now wants to move forward and respect the franchise.
Which means not rebooting. That's what that means. All right, you know what? Let me throw this question out here to you before we move on with the show. Now, all right, sit down for this, because this is a serious question. Would you want to see a crossover series of films, of Planet of the Apes films, that crossed over with Green Lantern and Star Trek and King Kong and Tarzan, the way they did in the graphic novels? So these would be standalone films.
That's an interesting question. And I guess my answer would be, it depends on how serious they take them. If they just throw them together because they figure they have an audience, then no, I'm not interested. But if they take them really serious and they stick to canon for either franchise, let's say it's Star Trek and Planet of the Apes they bring together. If the Star Trek characters stay true to the Star Trek franchise and world, and the Planet of the Apes characters stay true to the Planet of the Apes franchise and world, and they're able to find something that works as a story. They don't just throw them together, but they have a story that works, then I'm all for it. I don't know if I want to see this as an 1.5 to 2 hour movie, but maybe like a 40 to 50 minute, episode on a streaming medium.
I'm so gung-ho for another Apes TV series, but I believe after reading these graphic novels, these belong on the big screen. And of course, they're going to keep the characters consistent with what we already know from canon, but it's okay. It's like the Star Wars standalone films. Instead of a Star Wars story. These could be a Planet of the Apes multi-universe lane film, which means that they don't have to be cohesive with what we already have seen in the saga Planet of the Apes films. That's the only way this would ever work. And I love crossovers. I love mashups. I used to love the mashups when I was a kid, when you had Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein and the Mummy and all that nonsense. I loved that so much. And knowing that Disney is part of this, knowing that at some point Darth Vader could battle Urko, I stay up at night just fantasizing and sweating about that. But let's give them the freedom to move around and not paint themselves in a corner.
I understand that just as long as they do it right. Because, and I know I'm in the minority here, but like when I watch something like Smallville, it bugs me that Lex Luthor knew Clark Kent when he was a kid. Because wait a minute, I saw that movie that Richard Donner made, and they met much later in life.
That's a fantastic example. That's a fantastic example because I fell out of Smallville because of the inconsistencies with the films and what we already knew of the stories that came before it.
But like I said, I'm a minority when it comes to that kind of thing because Smallville was a big hit. So, you never know. To me, you don't have to stay exact, but stay true to the feel and the nature of who these characters are and the world that we have grown to see them in. It's interesting that you bring this up because we're about to talk about this Rod Serling unproduced script. And this idea of canon's going to be a big part of the conversation.
Well, what are you talking about? Like, they would ever change like a character like Dr. Zaius and make him into a human-loving orangutan? Oh, Mark. Mark. Who in their right mind would ever write something like that? Come on. Oh, you're so silly.
Well, why don't we move forward and find out?
Never happened, Mark. Never gonna happen. All right, now it's time. It's time to do what CBS couldn't do in 1974, and that is to tell the continuing tales of Alan, Pete, Galen, Urko's helmet.
I'm sorry. I laugh because in this particular episode, that statement's not completely true, but people will find out what I mean by that in a second.
What in all Kovacs are you talking about?
Unfortunately, of the 8 unproduced stories for the live-action television series, there are only 4 scripts available online. So, if you want to follow along, go over to Hunter's Planet of the Apes archives.
Then you can find the remaining synopsises. Synopsis just... Okay, I like synopsises, okay? So you can find the remaining synopsises on the remaining 4 stories in issue 12 of Simian Scrolls. And while you're over there, say hello to Dean Preston and let him know that we sent you. So, Mark, we're going to put all of this in the show notes.
We'll also put the links in the show notes as well.
All right, so let's give an overview of these 8 unproduced episodes, and they are Episode 1, which was written by Rod Serling, and this serves as the pilot. Episode 2, written by Rod Serling as a follow-up to his version of the pilot. Episode...
You almost said Episode 3.
Yeah, which is not Episode 3. This is just called Hostage, and it's not called Episode 3 because it wasn't written by Rod Serling. It was written by Stephen Kandel. And then we have A Fallen God, which was written by Anthony Lawrence. And those are the 4 scripts that we'll be going over in the next couple of episodes of Talking Apes. So, Mark, the next 4 are just in the form of a synopsis. And what are the titles to those?
Well, the first one is called The Trek, written by Jim Burns. And then we have Freedom Road, written by Arthur Rowe. The Mine, written by Paul Savage. And The Trial, written by Edward J. Laxo.
All right, so now let's get into it. The unproduced pilot titled Episode 1, written by Rod Serling. And this, as we'll find out, is a mixture of elements from the TV show and the 1968 film. So, Mark, before we give everyone a run-through of this story, what are your initial thoughts?
I was so looking forward to this because it was a new Planet of the Apes script. It was for the live-action TV series. It was written by Rod Serling. And you sent it to me in the form of a PDF, and I started reading it. And, I've talked about episodes like The Horse Race from the live-action series or Terror on Ice Mountain from the animated series, and I've been kind of harsh on them because I didn't really like them very much compared to the rest. I think that this script, and people probably see where I'm going, is the worst of any of the scripts for the Planet of the Apes franchise as a whole.
Whoa. Those are heavy words.
I was really, really disappointed, and I won't go into it too much here because we're going to go through it as a breakdown. But yeah, I thought the story was kind of weak. Not a lot really happens. And I think that Galen's character really had nothing to him in the sense of dimension or anything to really grab onto and care about with his character. So I was disappointed, which means you must have loved it.
Oh boy. Hell is freezing over right now because we both agree.
It actually made me realize how good that first pilot episode of the live action series that did make it to broadcast was.
All right, you know what? Let's do a service for all the apes out there, and we'll go over the story so they don't have to.
Well, they should anyway if they want to be completists and understand what we're talking about. I'm not telling them not to read it. I'm just giving them fair warning.
Let's just get into it, and you know what? Maybe they'll like it. If you like it, please leave a comment on our Facebook page. So, Mark, here we go. Now, this is Act 1, and the script, it starts out like the film, like the 1968 Planet of the Apes film, but here we have Alan Verdon. He's recording his thoughts before going into long-term hibernation, the same way Taylor did in the film. And Alan lays out his mission of finding the missing astronauts, including Taylor from the movie, and he mentions Thomas and Lefevre. Mark, where have we heard these names before? Thomas and Lefevre.
Now, Thomas stuck out for me right away, and I kept thinking that I remembered Lefevre from somewhere. Now, I know Thomas came from Rod Serling's original script, which we talked about when we covered the graphic novel by Dana Gould, which was based on that. And I believe, wasn't Lefevre from that script as well?
Exactly, he was. So here, Rod Serling is tying in Taylor from the movie and Thomas and Lefevre from his original Apes film script. So at this point, I'm loving the fact that he is bringing in all these characters. So I can't wait to see what he's going to do with other characters that we know.
I also got really excited when I saw Taylor and Thomas and Lefevre's name there because I thought that it was going to be interesting. He's going to pay respect to some past stories. And we're going to get into this a little bit later because I was confused. Was he talking about Taylor and his crew? Because these are not names from his crew, but later on in the script, they're going to treat it as if it's Taylor's crew. And this is where we start talking about canon because now I'm confused.
What I got from it is that there's been so many other astronauts who have blasted off into space and got lost in some kind of a time warp that he's going to go out looking for all of them, including Taylor and Thomas and Lefevre. And he also mentions another name, which I do not recognize, and that's Bengston.
I don't recognize that one either.
Yeah, I reached out to a couple of our ape listeners and said, hey, does this name ring a bell? And they all said no. So this is just a new name.
And now, later on, you're going to see that the script starts to imply that these are all part of Taylor's crew. And I started thinking to myself, did Rod Serling see the 1968 movie? Not just because of this, but you're going to hear me talk about it a little bit later. There's a lot of here that makes me wonder if Rod Serling cared about canon. Maybe he just didn't care. He was just telling his own story.
Back then, there's no such word as canon.
Yeah.
It was just get it written so we can get it on the air next week. That's what it was.
Right.
And so I don't think he ever thought about anything. He just needed a couple of names to throw out there. So he thought Taylor, Thomas, Lefevre, and my dog's name is Bengston, so I'll throw him in there too. Now let's move forward here, because Alan, well, he's not joined by Pete, not at all. Not at all like the TV show. No Pete Burke in this script, but yet he's joined by Stanley Kovac, which is the name I referenced in my opening. Kovac.
And you know I have a lot of problems with this Pete being missing from this story, and I think I'm probably going to stay away from this during this conversation.
But guess what? Stanley gets more backstory than Pete ever got, just as one script. And there's an interesting line here where Stanley, he wonders if the mind can assimilate being asleep for 6 years. So, the time they blast off to the time they get to their destination, it's 6 years.
So we get one voiceover from Verdon, and then then that's followed by a voiceover from Kovac. He's called Kovac throughout the script. Right. And so that's what you're referencing right now. So we go from one voiceover to the other voiceover, which was actually kind of confusing for me because I actually thought Verdon was doing the whole thing. But looking at the script, I see that both characters actually have a voiceover. I don't know why they both had to have their voiceovers.
All right, now we dissolve, and it's 6 years later, and they are now at their destination. The ship has landed on a planet, and Verdon and Kovac determine that the air is breathable and begin to investigate. I'm not sure how they determined the air was breathable. I think they looked outside the viewport window, and said, yeah, good enough.
I believe Kovac's taking readings.
Okay.
Or something like that. I'd have to flip through the script to find it. But yeah, I believe he was taking readings or something, because I believe he actually says what the air is made out of.
Okay. Now, during an excursion, Verdon and Kovac discover Taylor's ship.
Don't go any further. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm reading the script.
Right.
I'm thinking back to the movie, right? Okay, so Taylor's ship crash land in the middle of this big body of water. And Verdon and Kovac are finding pieces of metal from the ship on the beach. How did these pieces of metal get to the beach? Wouldn't they have sunk?
Remember when you were asking if Rod Serling had seen the film? There's your answer. No, he hadn't.
To me, it's like I'm reading stuff like this, and it's kind of like Rod Serling's obviously assuming that the ship crash land close to the beach, and that's not what happened in the movie. And so this stuff is, maybe I'm being a little picky, but this stuff is kind of bothering me because I'm like, why? How are they finding Taylor's ship?
I think Rod Serling was thinking, the film came out 6 years ago. There's no streaming. There's no Blu-rays. He's just going to think that no one is going to look into this. Little did he know that 50 years later, there'd be a podcast that did exactly that.
This is like a Twilight Zone episode for him.
I got no idea what you're talking about. Then, on another excursion, Verdon, he sees something in the distance. And what he sees are 4 skeletal remains. Oh, this is when things start to get really, really interesting, because these skeletal remains are sitting there against a wooden cross. And on one cross, there's a helmet with the name Taylor scratched into it. Oh, crossing the streams.
And he immediately notifies Kovac, who is still back at the ship, so he notifies him by radio. But wait a minute.
Hold on. There's one more wrench to throw into this, because as they inspect the skeletons, they realize that one skeleton belongs to an ape. Oh, where's this gonna go?
Here we go. We're barely into the script, and I'm already bringing this up so many times. Because of Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which came out in 1970, and this script was probably being written, around 73 to have a show for 74? We know what happened to Taylor. He was alive until the destruction of the Earth. So how could his skeleton be here? Shouldn't he be alive somewhere in the Forbidden Zone?
See, right now, you're putting way more thought into this than Rod Serling did.
I understand that, but I'm like being taken out of the script as this stuff is happening. I'm like, wait a minute, I thought Taylor, I don't understand.
All right, Mark, sit down, put your seatbelt on, and just get ready for the ride, okay? Because there's lots more fun stuff to come that you're going to freak out over.
Okay.
Now, this is the end of Act 1, but before we fade out, the screen direction tells us that as the camera pulls back far enough, a partially dressed anthropomorphic figure steps into frame. Now, when I read that, I got thoughts of the animated Planet of the Apes show, because that's how they would end an act. Someone would step into frame and then would fade out. That's the end of Act 1.
Wait, I got something to say about it.
What? You have something to say?
This is going to be positive, but it's not going to be positive about this script. There's a lot of reveals that are happening in this script that seem to take forever, because this is literally like page 10. It's before the first commercial. Going into this, we already know that it's going to be a Planet of the Apes. We already know apes are going to talk. We already know the situation. And what Rod Serling does here is he uses this ape stepping into frame as if it's going to set us on edge. But because I already know what the situation is because of the movies, this isn't going to work for me. If you remember in the original pilot, or I should say the pilot that was eventually produced, the Bobby Porter character, the little boy chasing the dog, he comes in right away and he's immediately talking.
All right, I've got a rebuttal to this.
Okay, wait, let me finish and then you can rebut.
What did you just call me?
But not only that, I mean, in that episode, the produced episode, we get to see the ape soldiers right away. We get to know the whole entire situation. Everything that we already know because we've seen the movies is lined up for us literally right away. Here, he's very slowly trickling it in, and I'm going to talk about this in a couple of areas, but it doesn't work for me. There's no tension for me because I already know all of this is coming. And so this was a good thing about the pilot that got aired. I feel like they did it right. They just put it all out there right at the beginning. And I kind of wish Serling had done that as well.
Now, for me, I came into Planet of the Apes at the age of 5 with the Planet of the Apes TV series. So I hadn't seen the films. Had I seen this at 5, I would have been pretty scared because I wouldn't have known what that was. Of course, you know, it's going to be some kind of an ape. But as a 5-year-old coming into this, I would have been shaking. I would not have known what was going to go on.
But a lot of people who are tuning into this were Planet of the Apes fans. So like, oh, cool, they're making a Planet of the Apes TV series. We love the movies.
But still, we knew something that the astronauts didn't. So we're fearing for them. We want to yell through the TV screen, look out, there's an ape, move, get out, run through a cornfield, or don't run through a cornfield.
But that's not what I feel they're doing here, or I should say Rod Serling's doing here, because he's trying to create tension by creating mystery. And I don't think that tension's going to be there because people who are fans of the movies are coming into this and they're saying, oh, look, an ape. You know, he's going to attack. Maybe there might be some tension because they're scared that he might attack.
Yeah.
But I feel like we should be discovering stuff, new stuff.
They're rebooting. they were already starting to reboot the franchise. Now let's start with Act 2. Fade up, and we start with this anthropoidal figure. What did you write anthropoidal? Just write a figure.
What is anthropoidal? Because I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I knew it was an ape, but I've never heard that word.
Now you're making me look it up. Resembling a human, especially in shape or outward appearance. So, Rod, just write figure. We're good. Okay, so here we go. And we know it's an ape, and it raises its arms, it opens its mouth like it's going to attack, but impulsively, Verdon whips out his pistol and shoots him in the neck.
Now, this is something small. I know you want to get to the shooting in the neck, but this is something small. I'm always told when I'm writing scripts to spell check everything and make sure it's all right. There's a couple of times, including right here, where it says, Novak pulls his gun out of his holster. Who's Novak? I know they mean Kovac, but I just wanted to mention
it's Rod Serling. He doesn't need to fact check anything.
Not fact check, but maybe spell check.
Alan has shot this ape in the neck. And I like the fact that they're taking the film and reversing it. So instead of Taylor being shot in the neck, now we have the ape being shot in the neck. And as they look at the unconscious ape, they conclude he's a pet since there's a rope around its neck. And of course, if he's a pet, then there must be a civilization somewhere. So they're starting to connect all these dots.
Did they ever explain the rope? Because I was like waiting for an explanation of why this ape would have a rope around its neck. And I don't think they ever explain it.
Maybe it's just an ape fashion sense. I don't know.
It's just there so that our two main characters, Kovac and Verdon, can make this assumption.
Well, there you go. There's your reason.
Okay.
So they carry this ape back to their ship, and Kovac, who is a country doctor, so far we're getting more backstory on Kovac than we ever got on Pete. He bandages up the ape, and the ape starts to stir as Kovac and Verdon continue to figure out where he came from. A zoo. Ooh.
Yeah, they mention a zoo, which is weird, but okay.
And the ape looks up at Verdon and opens its mouth as if trying to speak, but can't. Oh, once again, Shadows of Planet of the Apes, the movie.
Okay, stop.
Why? It's getting good. Come on.
We know the apes can speak. Why didn't they just have the apes speak here? Why did they have to keep this a mystery as if the audience is not going to know this and they're going to be able to reveal it later?
They should have called this episode 1 the reboot.
To me, if you already know that your audience is going to know certain things, and once again, they did this right in the produced episode that we saw, I don't understand what Rod Serling was doing here. The audience already knows all this stuff. Why are they hiding it? It's kind of cool that it's a throwback to, the original Planet of the Apes movie, but...
Hey, Mark, you do realize this was unproduced, right?
I'm starting to understand why, and it's making me worried about...
The producer said, yeah, Rod, here's your check, and we'll call you next time, okay?
I'm starting to understand why these are unproduced, and it makes me worried about what we're going to be reading later for other episodes.
Now, here we go for this next part, and I know that you'll have a lot to say about it, because Verdon asks Kovac if he remembers the ancient flick King Kong, and Kovac replies vaguely. Now, hold on, stop. What year is this that Kovac vaguely remembers a huge monster hit like King Kong?
You mean what year did they come from?
Yes, because if they're saying the ancient flick, King Kong, how old does a movie have to be to become labeled as ancient? Now, I was at the Hollywood Bowl a couple of months ago, and I heard these kids talking about this old movie, The Breakfast Club. I got up and left.
Well, two things here. One, just so everybody understands, the reason King Kong comes up is because they're talking about humans sympathizing with animals, because, they're helping this ape. And so they use King Kong as an example because of what King Kong does in that movie. But then when he dies, you have sympathy for him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I get where they're going.
I just wanted the audience to understand why King Kong was brought up in the script.
Right. And that in the analogy Verdon makes is that in the film, you do feel bad for what happens to King Kong at the end. Now, Alan, or Verdon, he feels bad for this ape that has been shot. And he starts to worry more about the ape than he does for them. He asks Kovac, is there anything in that black bag of yours that can put me back on track? Yeah, what you have there is a classic case of guilt. All right, then.
Wait. I had a second thing to say about this King Kong thing. This whole thing about King Kong is actually really interesting, and I kind of liked what they were saying, but overall, as an editor, I just kept thinking to myself, if I was in the editing room, we would have cut this out.
It's making Alan sound like a real jerk. Yeah, Alan, once again, you shot this ape in the neck, and you don't want to feel bad about it. I'm beginning to hate Alan at this point.
I had a problem with, is there anything in that black bag of yours can put me back on track? Because I'm not necessarily sure I understood that line of dialogue.
The black bag meaning the doctor's bag.
I understand that, but I don't... There are certain parts of the dialogue that feel very first draft. I have a feeling this was a first draft.
Okay. All right, now let's move forward, because Alan and Kovac, they go into the corridor of this ship and look out a window where they notice something moving outside the ship, which makes them worry, and immediately they think they're in danger again.
Out of all the ships you ever saw in any Planet of the Apes movie, were there any that were big enough to have a corridor?
They say corridor. I think they meant like that 5 inches of space between the seat and the door to the ship.
They were all these little tiny ships that only really fit the astronauts. So this is silly. If they wanted to have a big ship, they could. It was weird when it happened. I'm like, wait a minute, this ship had a corridor? They have these ships with like 4 people flying out and all that. No corridor. The one that fits only 2 people. Well, maybe that's why there was room for a corridor, because there were only 2 people in the ship. I don't know.
You feel better now?
Not really.
All right, now, Alan and Kovac, they decided to make a contingency plan in case they have to leave, but since they still can't account for one of the astronauts, because remember, there were 4 skeletons, 3 were humans, and 1 was an ape. So there's 1 unaccounted astronaut out there. And they don't want to leave him, or possibly her, so they decide to sit tight. And as Alan and Kovac,
You keep calling him Alan, but in the script, he's only referred to as Verdon.
Yeah, I know. I just can't call him Verdon. To me, he's Alan, okay? So, as Alan and Kovac wait for the strangers outside to do something, they decided that they're going to get some of the weight off the ship.
I think the plan is basically to go out and search for the missing astronaut, and then when they find him, they can immediately get on the ship and take off without having to lighten the load for easier takeoff at this point.
Right. So they start moving everything out, including this very heavy captured ape. And the ape, once he's outside, he stumbles over to the ship, and in his own blood, he writes on the hull, "I can speak." Whoa. But it starts to rain, and the water washes away the words before anyone can see it. Oh, another callback to the film. So this ends Act 2.
Yeah, and it's not a very good ending to Act 2.
Oh, come on. Come on.
It's not. We already know the apes can speak. So why not just let them see the words? Why does it have to wash away? And
they're building tension.
If it's going to wash away, why put him there to begin with? We already know he can speak. We don't need to be given the information. So why does this happen? And how is it building tension? I don't understand how it's building tension. We as an audience already know they can speak. A lot of us already saw the movies, and the people who didn't see the movies already know what they are and what they're about. This doesn't make sense to me. Also, this is just my opinion, but I like to be able to relate to my characters. And the way to relate to characters is to discover things as they discover them. So now by giving me information, let's say I didn't know that the apes spoke, by giving me information that the main characters don't know, I can't relate to them anymore because I know more than them.
Well, it's very Hitchcockian when he shows you the bomb and shows you the person in the same room and like, oh, I know something he doesn't, and tension will start to build.
I guess. To be honest with you, why put the words up there and then have them wash away? It doesn't make any sense to me. The other thing is when you're building story, you got to think about building tension. Get all the stuff we already know right out front and use your imagination. And Rod Serling had one hell of an imagination. Use your imagination to create the tension with new things and new ideas. Unless, and this could have happened, the producers told him specifically what they wanted and he was just going by that. In which case, they would be wrong. We are literally, halfway into the show, and an ape hasn't spoke yet, and they're still teasing us as if we don't know. But we do know.
You know what? You brought up a good point there. Maybe the producers did say, these are the elements we want in this TV show. We'll see you in 2 days.
But then if that's what they wanted in the TV show, then how come the script that got produced does it the way they did it?
Because they read the script and said, "Oh boy, did we make a mistake!" All right, that's our bad.
Let's blame Rod Serling, though.
Yeah, and they tried to call him back, but he was working on his Twilight Zone. All right, now let's begin Act 3, where Alan and Kovac are out searching for the missing crew, and once again they know that there's one more astronaut that could possibly be out there since we only saw those 3 skeletons, and we don't want to leave one man behind. And having no luck finding this astronaut, they get back to the ship only to see that the hull door has been ripped open, and the inside of the ship has also been pulverized. And they see the ape outside standing in the distance with a pipe in his hand. Oh, so the ape is, well, you know what? Can you blame the ape? If this is the actions the ape took, you shot me in the neck, I'm going to pulverize your ship. But did they go that way? Listen and find out. The ape approaches them and says, "Please wait." Oh, the ape can speak.
Oh no, I didn't know he was going to speak. What a surprise.
I can't tell by your tone. Was that sarcastic?
You be the judge.
Okay. So now the ape introduces himself as Galen. So now we can start visualizing Galen instead of just an ape. And
Right.
he wasn't the one that damaged the ship, and he did try to prevent it. It was the security police that he did try to fight off before they could pulverize the ship even more, but didn't have any luck there.
Why?
He then clues them in.
Why? Why
Because
didn't he? This guy just shot him. Why is he protecting their ship?
Because he wants a series.
That's the only thing I can assume, because now we're about to build into this relationship between Galen, Verdon, and Kovac that makes no sense, because they just all of a sudden they're friendly to each other.
If you have a series, that's a steady paycheck, okay?
He's protecting their ship, and it's like, why? I don't understand.
Well, get ready for this next revelation. He clues Alan and Kovac in that the populace, the government, they're all apes. Whoa. See, you did not see that one coming, did you, Mark?
I didn't see that coming. Yeah, I saw that one coming, and because now it's going to get very expositional, and I didn't like this about the script either, because now we're going to get into the part where there's no discovery by anybody.
Well, there's some discovery of Alan and Kovac, because Galen says to him the evolutionary progression is obviously in direct contrast to the planet Earth. It has been this way since the beginning of our recorded time. That comes out of nowhere. I'm not really sure how he got there. And why he's saying it's in direct contrast. Because what is he contrasting here? He's not contrasting their Earth, because he doesn't know about their Earth. Yes, I know, there's a lot of plot holes in that. Tons and tons of holes.
Here's the thing. I'm gonna go back to the produced script, the one that we ended up getting. And Galen was a fantastic character, because at the beginning of that episode, he only knows humans as, workers and, slaves. And when he goes out and he becomes friendly with Pete and Alan, I think the whole connection here is Pete needs to be there. Anyway, when he goes and becomes friends with Pete and Alan, he starts to get to know them. He starts to learn about them. He starts to, understand them. And he doesn't actually start to trust them until they lay their life on the line for him. It all makes sense, and you get this really great character arc for Galen. But because in this script, we have Taylor and his crew already landed, so everybody already knows all this stuff about him, including Galen, it just makes for a lot of, I'm going to tell you a whole bunch of stuff. There's not going to be any discovery on Galen's part. There's not going to be any real relationship built between Galen, Kovac, and Verdon ever. It's just going to be these characters walking around, talking to each other, trusting each other for some unknown reason. And I don't get it. I just don't get it. And I also wish there was a little bit more shock from Verdon and Kovac when he does speak, because their eyes are wide and their mouths open is about all we get.
Well, they're not surprised because they saw the movie, unlike Rod Serling.
Yeah. So I didn't like the relationship here with Galen, Verdon, and Kovac, because it doesn't feel real. I don't like the fact that Galen knows as much information as he knows. I love the original produced pilot because he's learning just as much about them as they're learning about him, and a real bond starts to create, whereas I don't understand the bond between Galen, Kovac, and Verdon anywhere in this script. Galen is he's filled with information, and we don't know where he got any of it. Evidently, it's from these other astronauts that landed, because they keep referencing these other astronauts. But now, of course, we get page upon page of exposition.
Well, yeah, and we need that because this is the pilot episode, and Galen tells them that he knows of the other 4 astronauts who were stronger, more intelligent, and superior to them. So yeah, I'm sure he did know. I'm sure he is referring to Taylor and Lefevre and Thomas and Bergstrand.
If I'm remembering right, because it's been a while since I've seen that original pilot, we get a lot of the information through Urko arguing with Zaius, or Zaius teaching Galen, so it all kind of makes sense. Here it's just Galen, Verdon, and Kovac, walking and talking, and it's boring.
All right, here, this is where they start to get out and action takes place, because in order to find parts needed to repair the ship, Galen brings Kovac and Alan to a settlement belonging to other humans. He gives the guys a little background in that here the humans are hunted for sport, just like the movie and the TV show. But when the last ship landed, the men who stepped out tried to change who was the hunter and who was the prey. Then they were shot. Well, they had that coming. You don't come to a civilization and try to reboot their way of life.
Did they actually do that? I'm trying to remember how it happened in the script, or were they just scared they were going to do that?
In the script, it says the men who stepped out tried to change who was the hunter and who was the prey.
Well, then they deserve to be shot.
Then there you go. We both agree on something.
Although, that's not what happened, because we know what happened with Taylor. He went off into the Forbidden Zone to live a life in solitude with Nova.
All right. Now, let's move on, because this is the part where I thought, whoa, this is an unexpected turn. Alan tells Galen that one of these skeletons was an ape. There was three astronauts and one ape. Who was that ape?
But Galen's going to reveal who the ape was.
And the ape, her name was Zira.
I don't accept that.
Well, she is amongst them because she tried to help the astronauts escape. And as for the fourth astronaut, well, he's dead. And that's the last we'll ever hear of him.
I do not accept Zira being dead, because I know that she went back in time, gave birth to Caesar, and that's how this whole thing started.
That's in a whole different timeline. Whole different universe. Whole different ape lane.
If Zira didn't go back in time, in the original movies, we got her giving birth to Caesar, and that's how it starts. You cannot kill her in the television show. Plus, I really like her, and I don't want her to be dead unless there's good reason, like in Escape from the Planet of the Apes, where they allowed her to, she's a sacrifice so that Caesar can be born and go do what he needs to do. Here, though, there's no reason for it. She's like Newt being killed off in the beginning of Alien 3. No reason for it. Sorry, didn't like it there. Don't like Zira being killed off here.
Well, maybe this isn't the Zira. This is just another Zira.
Another Zira.
Another
Okay.
Zira. They just happen to bring that up.
Okay.
Just to make Mark happy. That says it right there in the script. We're going to say Zira, even though it's not the Kim Hunter Zira. It's another Zira, just to make Mark happy. It says it right there on page 32. I'm looking right at it.
Okay.
All right. Now, let's move on again.
Do you think the ape fans hate me yet?
I know somebody hates you. Okay, now, by night, they sneak into Ape City that's all made up of architecture reflective of the Stone Age, a medieval village, and animal caves. And I like this. I like the fact that it's not just the stone architecture we see in the films and the TV show, but there's a little bit of a medieval look to it, and caves. That excites me.
This paragraph that describes the city, this is the best thing in the script. I read it and I really liked it. I'm like, well, at least they got the setting right.
Oh, if you're keeping score at home, I think that's twice that Mark and I agreed on something pertaining to the script. All right, but okay, Mark. Okay, something else is about to happen. You ready for this? It takes no time before Galen, Alan, and Stanley, well, that's his first name, Kovac, they are caught. They're caught by General, wait for it, General Ursus.
Okay, before you get to that, because I know you're going to have a lot to say about that, I just want to say that was after, 4 or 5 pages of exposition before we finally get to Ursus?
That's the end of Act 3. So we're already into our third set of commercials.
I just want people to know that's how much exposition there was before we get to Ursus.
All right, but Mark, you're focusing on the wrong thing here. They're caught by General Ursus. Where is my General Urko? I want to see Urko's, and I want to see his helmet.
I was going to say, more importantly, where's his helmet?
There's no reference here to his helmet whatsoever. That is really ticking me off. Okay. At this point, I threw the script across the room. I want nothing more to do with this.
Okay, so I'm going to defend Ursus.
You would?
I actually really like Ursus in this this script. But here's
I'm not saying I didn't. I want me some Urko.
But here's the thing. I think Ursus and Urko are pretty much the same characters, just they changed the name.
It's not like they wear the same clothes or anything. Oh, wait, they do.
No, but I mean, he acts like Urko, and he, has the same rationale of thinking like Urko. So I don't feel that Urko's missing because we have it in Ursus. I just wish he was called Urko, but this script was written before Urko was even a thing. And so I'm okay with Ursus being here because he is actually from the movies.
You're missing the whole point of this, Mark. You really are. What is the matter with you? I want Urko. I don't want Ursus. I want Urko. They're the same characters. They dress the same. They have the same temperaments. But I want me some Urko.
Rod Serling obviously knew something about the movies because he's getting the names right.
Okay, maybe he'd seen like a trailer.
I don't have a problem with Ursus. I think he's written really well here. Urko wasn't a thing in anybody's imagination at this point, so I don't hold it against him. The important thing is I think I think Ursus actually works here, and I think he works throughout the rest of the script. And I got to be honest with you, as much as we're going to keep going through the script, and I'm going to tell you things that kind of still bothered me, I think the script actually starts getting interesting here.
Well, yeah.
I think one of the reasons it starts to pick up for me here is because all that stuff that they'd been building up to, being a mystery, the apes talking, the ape soldiers, now that it's all out of the way and all the reveals have happened, we can get on with the story.
All right. Speaking of getting on with the story, let's get on with Act 4. And we open in a council building where Ursus doesn't say anything about a helmet, but Ursus is asking to destroy these animals who threaten their existence. Now, Mr. Zandy, he's an ape on the council. Yeah, he's on the fence here. He's not thinking these astronauts are a threat, but yet still wants to keep humans as humans outside of the ape culture.
Yeah, it's very unclear because he stands up to Urko like, he wants to protect the apes from the humans, but he's not on board with Urko's tactics.
Whose tactics?
I'm sorry, Ursus's tactics. Let's see how many times I make that mistake. But I did want to mention here, this was really interesting in the script, as somebody who's written scripts. He's introduced by the Speaker of the House, but every time he speaks, it says ape. It doesn't say his name. Like in a script, it says Speaker of the House, and the Speaker of the House speaks. Zaius, and Zaius speaks. This says the chair recognizes Mr. Zandy, and then when Mr. Zandy speaks, it just says ape. It doesn't say Mr. Zandy, ever.
That's funny. All right, now, guess who takes the floor? Dr. Zaius.
Woohoo! I think.
Oh boy, I'll take that woohoo back in a couple of seconds. Now, Dr. Zaius, he says that he prefers that the humans are kept alive. The other space travelers who landed here several years ago, they were killed, which prevented him from learning from them and finding a link to their history. And this is in contrast to the movies, where Zaius was scared that the humans would figure out their potential and where they once stood as the supreme race. So he wanted them all killed.
Yeah, he doesn't like the idea of anybody finding out the knowledge of where the humans used to be before the apes took over. Because he's scared that if they know what they're capable of, they can stand against the apes. Or at least that's the way he is in the movies and the TV series. Here he's saying stuff like, and this comes in the later scene, but he's saying stuff like, we could coexist. And he wants to learn from the humans. But if I'm remembering right, in both the live-action TV series and the movie, he already kind of knows all this stuff. And he's trying to keep it away from the apes and the humans, that's the point of the Forbidden Zone.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the stuff he's saying here doesn't necessarily make any sense.
Well, it makes sense to this particular script, just not to ape canon.
Right, but if you remember in the original pilot for the live-action TV series, or not the original, because I guess this would be the original, the produced pilot, Dr. Zaius actually also doesn't want to kill the humans at first. He also wants to learn from them so he can prepare for them in case, another set of astronauts appear. But then he says, and then he'll kill them.
Right. Oh, and the fact that in the movie Taylor could speak, that just means that Taylor's going to go and broadcast this to the other humans. Hey, guess what we're capable of doing? And that's Dr. Zaius' biggest fear in life.
He always wanted to hide it, but in this script, that's not the case. And I'm going to get to that in a second because we're going to go on to the next scene where something's said. But before we go on to the next scene, I want to say something more. I want to say something else positive about this script because I've been really hard on it. I actually like all this stuff that's kind of going on in the council because it reminded me of the animated series. A lot, because they always had those council meetings.
Right.
So I was enjoying it. I didn't like the spin on the characters. I liked Ursus, because he was just acting out Urko's part. I didn't like what they were doing with Zaius, but it did kind of feel good to be reading something that felt so close to that animated series. As bad as the animated series could be at times, and I know Rod Serling hadn't seen the animated series by this point, there was something about me connecting to that animated series that made it feel okay. Now back to Dr. Zaius, because he's now going to have a special meeting with Ursus.
Yeah. Dr. Zaius wants a little one-on-one with Ursus outside of the council, and after much deliberation, Zaius asks Ursus to let them go so they will leave this place, or he'll tell everyone about the spaceship, the nature of the men who came here, and why Ursus has this anxiety to place them in the ground without being seen or heard.
This is what Zaius says exactly. I make this an oath to you, a solemn oath. These men you will not kill. And apes like my young friend Galen who chose to befriend them you will not imprison. And if you take one step to do either of these things, I'll make the arrival of the spaceship common knowledge, and I will document the nature of the men who came here and why it is you have anxiety to place them into the ground without being seen or heard. So they don't actually talk about the astronauts taking off at first. It's a compromise they come to. Dr. Zaius is saying stuff like, I'll make the arrival of the spaceship common knowledge, and I will document the nature of man. Would Dr. Zaius make this common knowledge? And I'm watching this going, Zaius is not going to make, these astronauts common knowledge, the fact that they can build a spaceship, because he doesn't want other apes or humans to know what humans are capable of. He wants to keep them down.
Don't you think he's just bluffing?
He could be just bluffing, but I don't feel that that's the case here. I feel like he's really standing up to Urko. He's really standing up to Ursus, and what if Ursus said, no, I want to kill them anyway, because that's Ursus's nature? Then what's Zaius going to do? If he doesn't, if he doesn't go through with his threats, then he's not going to be any good when it comes to talking to Ursus anymore, because Ursus is never going to worry about it.
Well, Ursus isn't really the smartest ape in the tree. So I think he's bluffing, knowing that Ursus is going to back down. And Ursus does agree to let them go under the condition that they go back to their ship and leave the planet back where they came from. Now, wait, because this doesn't make any sense either.
Dr. Zaius' whole thing is he wants them alive so that he can study them and learn from them.
But he knows if they're kept there any longer, Ursus is just going to kill them. So let's get them out of here.
But the logic of, I want them alive so I can study them and learn from them makes no sense if his agreement is going to be, if you keep them alive, we're going to send them back into space where they came from. Because he can't learn or study them that way.
Maybe there's a day or two where he can have a little powwow with Kovac and Alan and learn enough, and that'll be enough time to get them out of there before Ursus goes, hey, wait a minute, I think Zaius was bluffing. I'm going to go kill these guys. And at that point, they're already out of here.
Right, which is an Urko thing to do, and we'll find out if Ursus does it or not. And what you're saying actually does happen, because now Zeus is going to have a little talk with Kovac and...
But wait. When you read this, that Ursus agrees and okay, fine, you guys go back to your ship and get out of here. Did you believe Ursus?
I didn't, because I know what Urko would have done.
I know what Ursus would have done too. When I read that, I thought, oh, guys, get out of here. Get out of here quick.
I felt like this Ursus was coming off as a mixture of the two Urkos from the TV series, the live action and the animated. And so because he was coming off as a combination of these two, I did not trust him. I kind of knew what was going to happen. I was hoping it didn't happen because it would have been nice to go in a different direction. But I did kind of think it was going to happen.
All right, we don't want to spoil anything more than we already had. So Zeus meets with Alan and Kovac and tells them that, yeah, you guys, you're released. You can go. And he says to Verdun and Kovac, it would be our hopes that we coexist. And Verdun tells him that they are not the animals. It's like, okay, Verdun, shut up. At this point, you've already been released. Get out.
Before you get to the next part.
Uh-huh.
When would Zeus ever say that he wants him and the humans to coexist?
But why would Verdun say that? You're calling these apes the animals. Shut up, Alan. Shut up.
Is that what he says exactly?
Yep. And then Zeus shows them a book of old newspapers with headlines that read, "Three-way nuclear war begins. China, Soviet Union, US all suffer massive damage." So Zeus knows what's going on. He knows what these humans are capable of. And at that point, Alan and Kovac, they realize they have been on Earth this whole time. I thought they already knew that.
Well, I just assumed they knew it from the beginning of the script, too, because at the beginning of the script, something we didn't talk about, and I can't believe we didn't talk about this, was all the conversation about time warps. And if they're going to talk about time warp to the extent that they did at the beginning of the script, you would figure, well, that the only thing that's been displaced is time, and therefore they would have known they were on Earth right from the start. Oh, and by the way, we're on page 39 of a 46-page script when we get to this reveal that maybe not everybody, well, let's say about 80% of the people who turned this on, or who would have turned this pilot on if they had made it, they already know. All these people already know this, so why are we waiting till page 39 to get to it?
Because they didn't know. Alan and Kovac, they had no idea. I'm going to call him the Econo-Pete. Now, Zeus tells them, and what did you find, gentlemen? You find the legacy of man. You have a planet of rubble taking its second breath. This time, with man pushed out of the driver's seat because of his infinite capacity to drive to his own destruction. Hear, Zeus.
As Zeus is saying all this stuff, because he also goes on to say, do you understand, gentlemen, why you are feared here? Man, as we know him, is a primitive cave dweller who has only recently learned the use of fire. You represent the potential of man with his ingenious capacity to split atoms and poison the earth.
I agree. I agree with Zeus. I'm on his side on this one.
As he's talking and he's saying stuff like, you had the knowledge to do this, you had the knowledge to do that, it seems to me like Zeus already knows a lot about the humans, so why does he necessarily have to study them, which risks them staying on Earth, getting away, and teaching the other humans to stand up for themselves?
Yeah, he plays more of the chimpanzee scientist than the lawmaker he does in the film.
I think the reality is this Dr. Zeus wants just peace. He wants to coexist with the humans, but he doesn't talk like that. This Dr. Zeus says one thing, then he says another, and then he says something completely different. I don't like this. I don't like the way they built this characterization of Zeus, because I'm not necessarily sure that Rod Serling understood Zeus and who Zeus was and why we like Zeus.
Or maybe he just hadn't seen the film. Any of the films.
Or the TV. I was going to say, or the TV shows, but they hadn't come out yet, so...
So now the apes are sending Alan and Novak back to their own time with the knowledge that humans really messed up the future. And when Alan and Galen and Kovac, they reach their ship, the spaceship, they see it has been destroyed. Who could have done this? Ursus, we're looking at you. Because it was Ursus! Ursus and his men.
Ursus pulled an Urko. I bet she's wearing a helmet, too.
Never says in the script. Never says that. I'm so bummed out about that. Zeus tells Galen to take off and run. Get out of here. We know what Ursus is capable of doing. Just get out. And an action scene follows with Galen, Verdun, and Kovac escaping.
We're on page 41 before we get this finally an action scene. And I'm thinking we're going to get a really good action scene because all the rest of the action's been like really quick. You know, the shooting of Galen by Kovac. It happens really fast and all that. But here's a place where we can get a really great action scene.
It's over in one dissolve.
Yeah, if they had shot this action scene, it would have lasted about 30 seconds. They get away so easily. Although I do like there's a little bit of a confrontation between Ursus and Zeus, where Ursus approaches Zeus and he says, as always, inventive, opportunistic, and difficult to kill, referring to the humans. And Zeus replies, and as always, devious, murderous, and without honor, referring to Ursus. And then Ursus says, and so I shall remain until we find them and rid the planet of them. Survival, Doctor, survival. That's all there is. That's my second favorite thing in the script, and those are probably that's probably my favorite back and forth between two characters in the script. I do really like that back and forth.
Okay. All right. Well, at this point, we think the show is going to end, but they dissolve with Alan and Kovac and Galen. They're now dressed in peasant clothes, so, a little time has passed, and they approach several humans who seem very scared of Galen, and they should. And an old man
Right.
approaches them, and Alan suggests that they want protection from the apes, and the old man says, against apes? You gotta fight them with our bare hands. We may be a dying race, but no one here wants to die. All right, that seems plausible, and I'm not liking this Alan, because he's asking these strangers to protect them against the murderous apes.
Yeah, why is he asking them for protection? What does he think they're going to do? They're cave dwellers, and the apes have got like rifles and stuff.
And horses.
And helmets.
And Kovac, he asks, what would you rather do? In helmets. Kovac asks, what would you rather do? Live in trees and caves? Did it ever occur to you, any of you, that this hasn't always been the condition of man? Ooh, he's starting to spread the word. This is what Zeus was always fearing. The man says he is aware of what was the conditions of man and shows them a rusted out car, something that man has once made and drove in.
Now, how much do you think he does know about the conditions of man? Do you think that they know everything that Zeus knows? In which case, if they did know that, why don't they use that knowledge? I guess they're scared of the apes and the apes keep them down. But if they did know that, why does Zeus not understand that they know that?
Maybe Zeus doesn't know that they know that.
Right, but I'm curious to know how much they know. Maybe the car is the extent of what they know.
Well, they know something because they somehow know that this car was built by man, and this is what man's capable of. So we know, but nothing we can do about it.
I think I like the way the movies and the live-action TV series, I guess the animated series too, handles this by having the humans know nothing. So that as the series goes on, they can learn. As opposed to letting them know everything here, and then there's nothing for them really to learn except for the need to survive, I guess, and the need to stand up for themselves.
Yeah, well, they know they have a car, but how did man make that, and what's happened to man? That's what they're going to eventually have to learn.
Right.
Now, we dissolve to an ape courtroom. Boy, this just keeps on going. We dissolve to an ape courtroom where the judge tells Zeus that he will let him off if he guarantees he will no longer help the humans or get in the way of the security force. Well, Zeus cannot guarantee this. He insists that they will all have to learn to coexist, or man will take what they think is rightfully theirs, and they will be the masters.
Okay, I just want to say one thing about this coexist line because I want to get your opinion. He says, this is Zeus, he says, and I would remind the chief of the security police that you must either coexist with man or man will return to reclaim that which is his. Do you think any of the other Zeuses we ever met would ever say you must either coexist with man, or he's basically saying you must coexist with man, and I don't think he's saying coexist the way it is, where man and ape are separate and man are slaves and all that. I get the feeling whenever he says this, he's trying to get peace between man and ape, at least the way it's written in this script. And this is why I don't like Zaius in this script, because I like the Zaius who would say, we have to coexist, but they're going to be our slaves, and they're going to be this, they're going to be that, they're going to be this. You know, we're still going to hunt them. We're still going to... I don't like the fact that there's this assumption that Zaius actually wants to live in peace with the humans, because I don't think that's ever been the case.
Well, this is the whole different Zaius. And I'm reading in the script that this is Bob Zaius.
Bob, huh?
In the film, it was Tim Zaius. And then in the TV show, his name was Mark Zaius. So there's your answer right there. And we end with Verdon, Kovac, and Galen walking into the distance. Fade out. The end. I'm so glad that they went with the fun roller coaster ride that they eventually had with the TV show. That was exactly what, as a 5-year-old, I got into. I never would have gotten into this as a kid. I would have turned this off immediately and gone to Chico and the Man.
I got to tell you, I'm really glad that they used the script they used eventually as well. There are so many things about the script that they eventually used for the produced pilot, the one that aired, that is so much better than what we got here. The fact that they give us all the obvious stuff right up front, rather than trying to create all this mystery with stuff that we already knew. I think Pete is a much better character than Kovac. So I'm really glad that, Kovac was pushed aside and we brought Pete in, and I'm hoping some of these other scripts that we get to will have Pete in them. But the thing I really liked about the pilot we eventually got was the relationship between Pete, Alan, and Galen. Here, I feel nothing of a relationship building. I feel nothing of any kind of understanding or trust being built with any kind of character arc. In the pilot that we eventually got, when Galen first meets the humans, he doesn't believe some of the stuff that they're saying. He's not believing the stuff that's in the book. He thinks that, humans are still supposed to be slaves. And through their relationship, we get this really great story for Galen as he grows to know them and trust them. And then, Alan and Pete do what they do to help Galen at the end of that show so that he definitely knows he can trust them. So this relationship is really incredibly built, and that is so missing from here. Galen just feels like a nothing character in this script. But I just think that the pilot we eventually got is miles ahead of what this Rod Serling script is. And I'm really disappointed because it was a Rod Serling script. I was really looking forward to it.
Now, before we wrap things up here, Mark, when you were reading through the script, whose voices did you hear for these characters? When you heard Galen, did you hear Roddy McDowell? Did you hear Return to the Planet of the Apes animated show? Whose voice did you hear for some of these characters?
I think I heard all the voices from the characters from the live action TV series, and Urko's voice would have been, coming from Ursus, because I feel like they kind of are the same characters here. And I think Ursus is actually the best character here, by the way, and I actually really liked Ursus here. But I refused to put Pete's voice in Kovac's mouth, so I just used my own voice for that.
For some reason, I don't know why, and I hate myself for admitting this, but when I read Galen's lines, I heard his voice from the animated TV show. I didn't hear Roddy McDowell. I don't know why. I can't explain it, and I'm so ashamed. So I may have to cut that part out because I don't want that ever to get out to the other apes. All right, there, ape fans. We hope you really enjoyed our breakdown for episode 1, which was the Unproduced Planet of the Apes TV series pilot written by Rod Serling. Now, will episode 2 be any better? Will it be a rehash of what we've already seen? Stay tuned and find out. All right, Mark, we got some interesting apes comments, And this first one comes from our good friend, Mr. Anthony Pomis. And he left a message on Facebook that read, "A fantastic new episode, Luke." Rich. And he's referring to our last soundtrack episode. And he continues, "Yes, Rich, it's your buoyant and ever-hopeful, wide-eyed, fantasy-wired spirit across the mic that leads you to Skywalker status. Meanwhile, I consider our beloved Mark Wagushewitz the mellow Kubrick of podcast because of his near unquenchable thirst for a tight storyline, consistent character trajectory, and eternal preference of puddles over rivers. But he delivers his perfection-seeking pronouncements with one of the most laid-back, melodious tenor tones this side of Tinseltown. If you two were ever to run for office, I know which two-titan team I'd vote for."
And if he's going to be voting for me and you, then this country is
Disney Plus for everybody. And I would tell the powers that be over at Disneyland, you must have a forbidden zone. After that, I'm done.
I love it when they reference old shows, because here he says his eternal preference of puddles over rivers. And I haven't thought about that conversation in so long, that whole puddle river conversation. And I love it when they reference this, because it gives me these flashbacks to these really ridiculous arguments you and I have.
This goes back to one of the animated TV shows that we were reviewing, and I think it was you who was arguing it was a river, and I was arguing, no, it's a puddle. This little tiny thing in this show, which meant nothing to the plot, but I think you and we didn't talk for like 2 weeks after that.
Yeah, I don't remember who said river, who said puddle. I just remember that I brought up something about, wait a minute, that's not a river, that's a puddle, or vice versa. And this one little thing turned into this big deal. Like, it, just so people know, we didn't just talk about it on the show. We talked about it for weeks.
Yeah,
when the show wasn't being recorded.
This almost ended a 20-year friendship. That's how seriously we take things. When it comes to running for office, I think you're right, man, because we know how to argue and argue for what's really important.
I'm trying to remember what the conversation was because it was so long ago, but I think that we got this shot of something really small and they called it a river, and I'm like, that's a puddle, something like that. We need to go back to that episode and re-listen to it. I'm going to go back to that episode and re-listen to at least that part now. Thank you, Anthony, for giving me that flashback moment and in this need to re-listen to one of our episodes.
All right, then we got a very interesting email titled, "Are You Still There?" And I saw this and I thought, what? What is this? And this gentleman, Tom Watson, he wrote to us and said, "I've been listening to your podcast a few years late, sadly. Just like the two of you, I have very fuzzy memories of this TV show, most of which have come back to me after rewatching it on MeTV." He's talking about the live-action show. "It feels a little like the boys' experience in Legacy when they stumbled across a now ancient computer and its memories of the life they left behind. Revisiting Planet of the Apes is like reaching back into history just like they did. Anyway, if you're still there, thanks for all the hard work you've done. I've really enjoyed dissecting each episode with you. Tom Watson."
I feel like I've failed our listeners. He says, if you're still there. I wish we could get more episodes out and done. It's just my work life is starting to take over. We do this as much as we can, but I do feel a little guilty that we don't get them out a little bit more.
Well, no, I don't think he means that. I think he just listened up to the end of the Planet of the Apes live action breakdowns and maybe lost us on iTunes, and maybe when iTunes switched over to Apple, something got lost and we got booted off of his playlist because it's very easy to find us, but apparently he lost us somewhere in the shuffle and didn't know if we were still out there.
Right, I guess. I don't know. It seemed to me like it opens with the question, are you still there? That maybe he got to the final of our shows and then went looking for another one, then had to wait 2 months. And he's like, maybe they're not on anymore. And, this is something that I feel kind of guilty about. I wish I could do more episodes. Unfortunately, life has taken over. But all I can do is promise that we'll get them out as soon as we can.
Well, now that we have a clear trajectory on what we're going to do for the next couple of episodes, I think it'll be a little bit easier to get episodes out on a more regular basis instead of every 3 to 4 months. Maybe 2 months? Should we say that?
Yeah. I don't know. All we can do is the best we can, because like I said, this one in particular, as you know, was a tough one to record because my work schedule got so busy that I just pulling my hair out trying to find time. And I want to still put on a good show. I don't want to just rush through a show. So
yeah, then comes June, and that's when my schedule gets extremely busy. But we're going to do the best we can, Apes. We're not being lazy. It's just that stupid other real-life commitments.
Got to pay our bills. Why? Why do we have to pay bills? Why can't we live like the cavemen and just live?
Exactly. There's something to that humanoid life. All right, well, that about does it for this episode of Talking Apes. So now, on the next Talking Apes, we're going to break down the next episode that was unproduced for the TV series called Episode 2.
I so look forward to it.
I know you do. I know you do. I think you need some time off after reviewing Episode 1, Mark.
How about 2 months?
All right. I'm gonna hold you to that.
Okay. We also want to thank Angela Rushmere for posting those fun photos on our Facebook page, and to Rob Dellinger, who composed the theme to Talking Apes. Please check out Rob's band at alpharhythmkings.com.
And a big thanks to my sweetie wife, Sarah, for helping us with all the technical sides of Talking Apes. And if you haven't already heard me and Sarah on our Star Wars Disney podcast, Skywalking Through Neverland, well, please head on over there to skywalkingthroughneverland.com. Now, for more vintage apes news and stories, go over there to Simeon Scrolls at pota.goatley.com. And Goatley is Goatley. And you can also go over there to theforbiddenzone.net. Hey, Mark, if someone wants to leave a review, where would they go?
Apple Podcasts or Stitcher reviews are also greatly appreciated.
Now, we're not going to tell you how many stars to leave us, but we want you to be honest, and we'd like to hear and see more reviews, because our shows are based on your reactions. Like this show today and next couple of shows are all based on the feedback we got from you apes, that you wanted us to break down these unproduced scripts, and now we're doing them. So we want to hear from you.
The whole entire series of episodes based on the animated series came directly from requests from the fans. Because if you remember right, we were just going to end at the end of the live action series, and that was going to be it. That's all we were going to do. But we got too many people saying, well, what about the animated series? You got to do the animated series. You got to do the animated series. And so Talking Apes TV survived through that. And at that point, people then wanted interviews. And, hey, keep going with this, that, and the other thing. And then Talking Apes TV was put to rest, and Talking Apes was reborn, I guess you would say. Mm-hmm. And now we're doing the shows we're doing. And
because you had really requested us to do the animated TV series, well, we won't hold that against you, okay? It almost ended a 20-year friendship between me and Mark, and got into so many arguments. Bears, vampires, pigs, what are in those windows? Oh, we haven't argued as much over anything else as we had during the animated TV series.
I still need someone to explain those vampires, because I don't see them.
I know you don't. All right, apes, stay tuned for bloopers and other fun conversational bits right after these credits. So, until next time, this is Richard.
This is Mark.
Now go ape.
The new films that were created by Matt Reeves and... what the hell's that other guy's name?
Rupert
Wyatt. I'm trying to think. I'm going to use the word created for you to edit this on. Created by Rupert Wyatt and Matt Reeves. Let me start that over again. You can clap your hands or whatever, so you don't have to listen to all that mess.
And you slayed it too, so I'll know where to go on yours.
Oh, yeah, I'm not going to cut that out. See, you hear the slates? Okay.
This may be a little abstract, but it's called Episode 1, Attack of the Phantom Revenge.
Attack of the Phantom Revenge?
Of the Apes.
Are you sure about that?
You know what? Hold on. Okay, and this is my fault.
You're trying to piss me off, aren't you? You're getting back at me for the conversation we had earlier today, aren't you? Then you can find the remaining synopsises of the 4 remaining stories in issue 12 of Simeon Scrones.
Okay, start again because you said Simeon Scrones.
Scrones.
I hope so.
Hold on 1 second.
Is someone washing dishes?
No, hold on 1 second.
Is that your cat?
That's the Muppets interrupting us.
Are they washing dishes?
Because it made me truly understand how good that first pilot episode was when I saw how easily it could have gone wrong. Hold on 1 second. I'm just going to type into my thing here, recording apes, so my wife doesn't call back.
He didn't mention Landon or Dodge for some reason. Or the woman whose name I don't remember. Damn it.
I don't remember it either. I feel so horrible.
All right. No kidding. It feels like only yesterday it was 2013 where we got together and said, hey, want to do a podcast about talking apes?
Hello, I'm Dr. Zayers from the Planet of the Apes, of course. My favorite podcast to listen to is Talking Apes, even though it's hosted by filthy humans.